Okay. Now with that, I'm gonna actually, for a change, shut up and let Thomas do his thing. Again, really excited to have Thomas here today, and take it away.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Greg, for allowing me the opportunity to speak to MIC. And I want to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone who is here and everyone who is almost here. Now, I want to recap on some of the previous things that we talked about in our last part one of the band business. And that is obviously, I'm talking to people who I'm going to say already know everything. Okay. So there's nothing that I can really tell you that you don't already know. And if you don't already know it, well, welcome to new knowledge. But this is also a reminder to some of the people who are pretty well, experienced in being in bands, running bands, et cetera, because a lot of things you have to be reminded of, so that way you can make sure that you stay focused in your mission, which is to manage your own band or other bands. Let's start out like this. Okay, so here's something very important. And as I always tell you, I'm going to skip around, but everything is going to be relevant and related to the subject matter at hand. When you are in a band and you are performing live, something that a lot of band members and bands always forget because they're so into themselves. One good point, you only had two songs to captivate or to win over your audience. You don't have an entire set to captivate and win over your audience. And see, a lot of bands, when they're preparing their sets, a lot of them say, well, look, let's, some bands, they got good sense and they'll start out with their best material, okay? And their entire set, the first set is really, really awesome. But then you got those other bands that they'll start out with stuff and they'll go like this, eventually reaching a climax. You'll lose. You want to make sure that your first two songs, your first three songs, are definitely going to captivate and make that cash register ring, because your mission is to make that venue's cash register ring. And I say that because if you don't make it ring, then you won't be coming back to that venue. So don't take your audience for granted. You want to make sure that your first two songs are really impressive and they really captivate that audience to make them want to hear more. And you give them your best impression. Now, how do you do this? Okay, so now we're into part two, which means the meat and the bones, the gritty, metal to the pedal. So how do you do this? Well, one thing you want to make sure that you do when you're preparing your sets is to put your material in blocks. Blocks. I say blocks because you want to make sure you have your songs that go together and that you have transitional points in your songs to another song that makes sense. In other words, if you want to tell a story in your songs, in other words, you want all your songs related. You don't want to put people on what we call a seesaw. In other words, when you're preparing your sets and you're preparing your blocks of songs, you want to make sure that you're like a DJ. A DJ, if you notice, his beats, his formatted beats are like this. In other words, either they're 120, and then all of a sudden, for a while, he'll put some blocks of songs where they're 90, or then he'll go 100. He won't go 100 and then 75 and then 150 and then all of a sudden down to 60. In other words, that's put people on a seesaw. You don't want to do that. You want to keep people motivated and moving. You want to direct them. Does that make sense? Shake your head. You put the songs in blocks. You put your material in blocks with transitions between each song. Now, you want to give your sets enough um, periods in between where you can relate and talk to the audience, sure. But you want to also make sure that you don't consistently transition from song to song to song to song. You want to give people's ears a break. Okay, you got to remember now, you got to give people's ears a break sometimes. So, say you're doing two songs, then you do a transition to nothing but speaking to your audience for a few seconds. Then you go into your other song. This is what I mean by putting your songs in blocks and then transitions. The next thing you want to make sure that you want to find common material that your audience will appreciate for the era that you're representing. So, in other words, if you are a band, a cover band, let's say a cover band, everybody knows what a cover band is because I'm speaking to experienced people here. Um, I'm not talking about tribute bands here now, I'm talking about cover band. If you're a cover band, you want to make sure that your material is relative to the era that your audience that you are playing for can appreciate, that they can understand. Don't play a whole bunch of B-sides. You want to make sure that you're an A-side band, unless that B-side that you're playing could be typically an A-side, depending upon the location that you are geographically. And I say that because, say, for instance, in Maryland, some bands, their A-side would be in South Carolina, a B-side. So you want to make sure that if you're located in a place that you're, say, in the middle, that you also play a B-side that some of those people would appreciate. Make sense? So, and that's also part of making your material valued for your audience. You want to look at your audience and gear it towards your audience. Now, I hear some band members a lot of times they say, well, I read the audience, and then I'll play what I read from the audience. And to me, that's okay. It may work sometimes if you're in a church. If you're in a church, then you read your audience. If you're not in a church, then you don't read your audience. You go with a set list, buddy. Because if you don't, then there's too much communication and talking that you have to do to your band, first of all. If you don't have a set list, see, let me tell you like this. For some of you who don't know, in a church, bands play according to what they classify or what we used to classify as in the spirit. Okay. Your whatever the spirit says, that's what we play. And so the band leader, who's the music director, he'll dictate to the band what to play, you know? That's different than being in a secular environment and you're on a secular stage, a commercial stage, and you're playing in front of an audience because an audience don't want to see you turning around and talking to your band, telling them what songs to play. They are under the impression that you already got your stuff so much together that everybody knows what comes next, regardless. Now, how do you deal with that and still read your audience? You deal with it like this. Some songs that you have on your set list, you may not play it as long as you would if you read your audience as not enjoying it, but you still go according to the plan. You won't see Earth, Wind, and Fire or Lionel Richie reading the audience because they're too professional. They rehearse a show and A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. In other words, songs are in this order. I don't care if the audience likes it or not. This is the order that we're doing the songs. And every show that you go see them, even people like Now Rogers, Greg, he's got a format. He's got a show. The audience may not like good times, or they may not like freak. But guess what? It's song number 4 and it's song number 5. Sorry about that, buddy. This is the way it is. So you got to make sure that you are running your material and your set list if you're doing commercial. I'm not talking about churches, okay? That's a whole different segment. But I have to tell you that so that you'll know the difference when you hear a person say, "Well, I'll read my audience." Wrong answer. Have a set list, and you go by your set list so that you don't have to be talking to your band members. Now, of course, there are emergencies that come up where you may have to skip over a song, and then you have to, communicate to the band members that, hey, don't do song number 5. Let's do this XYZ song, but that's not many times. Okay. You have to look at that. You have to be professional. If you want to be looked at as being a professional group, then you have to be professional acting. Make sense? You with me? Okay. Now, also, when you are starting your band and you're getting ready to start touring or you're getting ready to start playing different venues, prior to you doing all of that, you want to make sure that you get out and visit at least 10 to 15 live shows of local bands, and it's not all the time, even though you want to support the bands, by showing up and, giving them accolades and everything. One of the main reasons that you're going out there is because you want to see what's happening out there with the local bands. How are they relating to the audience and how the audience is relating to them? So you want to do at least 10 to 15 of those. I say 10 to 15 because that's a good number for you to go out and see. 2 or 3 visits is not going to do it for you. That's not going to do it. You want to go and see 10 to 15 different venues that are hiring and or have live bands there of different genres, not just your genre, because you can pick something up from everybody's show. I don't care if you're an R&B artist, go out and look at somebody's country and western show. Go out and look at somebody's jazz show. Go out and look at somebody's praise and worship show. Go out and look at all of it because it's about stage presence, about what works, what doesn't work, how you can steal from people's show. And I say very, very, very cautiously when I say steal from people's show. What I mean is if it works and it looks good and it fits your personality and your aura, then go ahead and take it and use it and fit it and mold it around your band and yourself. Shake your head if you're with me. Okay. Um, you have to establish also some rules, what I call rules of engagement for your band members. Certain simple things like do not wear statement shirts. What's a statement shirt, Thomas? Well, a statement shirt is something that has something on it that could be um, derogatory to somebody. I mean, even though people say, well, everybody's offended by everything. Well, that might be true. So if that's the case, wear plain stuff. Don't wear stuff with pictures on it or statements or slogans or logos that could be offensive. First of all, because it doesn't just reflect what you think or feel. It casts that same thing on your entire band. Okay. So if you're going out there and you're wearing a t-shirt that has a slogan on it, and you're the only one in the band that has that t-shirt with a slogan on it, um, they're not just going to look at you. Of course, they're going to associate you with that slogan and think you're either a bad guy or a good guy, or a good girl or a bad girl. They're going to think that that band also is okay with you being that way. So that may cause a problem, not just for you and the band, but maybe even for the venue. Think about it for a minute. If they think that that venue is okay with somebody wearing a skull with crossed bones and a knife going through, that may alienate that venue from certain type of clientele that the venue is really wanting to attract. Okay, so stay away from statement clothing. Um, you want to also make sure that you keep merchandise, whether it's physical or whether links or whether hard drives, a collection of hard drives in a box on hand at all times whenever your band is performing. That way you can make sure that you have something to give out to your audience. You'd be surprised how many bands that I've seen, they don't have any material, any type of anything to give somebody so that they can follow up with them and look at them and listen to them in private, et cetera, et cetera. Those days of people having CDs and records or whatever are so far gone and forgotten that people don't realize that that's a good merchandise driving thing and income making thing. So you need to make sure that you have some items on hand, merchandise, t-shirts or whatever. Now, I said don't have any statement clothing on, but it doesn't mean you can't have statement clothing on with the name of your band or the picture of your band on the back of a t-shirt out there on a merchandise table. You know, people put that thing on whether they're cutting grass or whether they are walking downtown, but it's advertising the name of your band, et cetera, et cetera. Right? That's permissible to have. A lot of bands also, I notice, um, what happens after the show? They disappear. You know, don't disappear on your audience. Go out there, take a few more minutes, unless the venue says, "Hey, y'all got to unpack and load y'all stuff out of here because we close 15 minutes after 12 o'clock." You know, that's a different story. But if the club is still open or the venue is still open, you want to make sure that you spend some time out there lollygagging and, you know, talking and having fun with the audience that came to see you. That is the only time, a lot of times, that you'll get to even interact with that audience live, face to face, building that relationship face to face, letting them know that, hey, in about 3 months or 3 weeks, we'll be back here or we'll be at XYZ venue. And we really would appreciate if you come in and come listen to us again with a different show, which is the next thing I want to go into. Your show gets old. Sometimes people will go to the same show and they don't even realize that people are getting tired of this show. So even if you have to take your sets and mix up the songs in different order, make sure that you change your show up. Now, of course, there are large acts out there that you know what's going to be song number four, but even they switch up their shows. They switch up the order of their songs also. Okay, so don't think that they are so um, big-headed that they just go with the same show every time. They go with the same songs every time. But a lot of times the order is different, or the introduction of the song is different. Okay? Make sense? Change your stuff up. Um, Along with wearing statement shirts, you want to make sure also that, let me tell you something. People are so conscious, especially in this political driven world, of even items that suggest to them where you are in a political or religious stance. So you have to be, as the leader of your band, so conscious of that, that you make sure that you are the one that polices everything on that stage. I'll give you an example. You may have a guitar player that from his guitar is hanging an item from the headstock. And that item is something that maybe you think is harmless, but to somebody else, it may be a voodoo item, and you don't even realize it. And if you don't believe me, you haven't been around to see certain things that people have hanging on their drums, on their drum stands, on their cymbals, on their guitar heads, on their mic stands that represents something to a group of people. You have to be, as the band leader, so knowledgeable and not afraid to ask somebody in your band, what does this mean? What is this item right here that you have that's hanging? What does it mean? And let them explain it to you, unless you already know that it's harmless according to everybody, not just you, everybody. Remember, you are a public figure. A band is a public figure. What the band has and what the band says and what the band plays represents something that is public. Shake your head if you with me. This might go over somebody's head, but it could save your career one day. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about, you want to keep your rehearsals closed. Close your rehearsal doors and lock them after every individual is in there. You don't want to spoil your rehearsals by always constantly having to put on a show because you have visitors there. What are visitors? Visitors are things like people's wives, people's husbands, their girlfriends, their friends, of family, that think they have total access to the band because their cousin or whoever is in the band. And the next thing you know, you're putting on a show instead of letting everybody be relaxed enough to make mistakes. Okay? They have time that they can come and see you, which is at the show, or at least one time a month, then you can open up your band rehearsal if you want. Okay? But other than that, close your band rehearsals. A lot of people, they say, well, we don't mind, but well, but guy, you got kids running around, banging on the drums. You got, girlfriends giving the guy a bad look because they got a front lady who's fine as I don't know what, and so now she's jealous or vice versa, et cetera, et cetera. You wouldn't have to worry about all that if you close your daggone rehearsals, get busy, and just, hey, this is what I do, babe. And if you don't like it, then I was doing this before you. Okay. So this is what we do. And we close our rehearsals unless it's an emergency. That way, everybody can not be afraid of making a mistake or having to put on what we used to call back in the day airs, putting on airs, because, they just trying to impress everybody instead of just doing what they do. And plus, closed rehearsals allow you and your band members to become one. In other words, you know each other. Remember back in the first one I talked about, if this is not the type of person that you would invite to your dinner table with your family, they don't need to be in your band. This is when you find out if you also would seriously invite this person to your dinner table because you have closed rehearsals. You know each other. You know what a person feels like. You know what they look like. You know what they smell like. That's just how close you are as a band. And that's what you need. You don't need open rehearsals. I think you got me on that. I think you know what I'm talking about. Um, you need to also don't be afraid to make corrective actions on people. Don't be afraid to make corrective actions on people's statements. Their public statements in the band rehearsal. I'm not talking about when you're on stage and somebody says something, then you want to jump all over that person and say, no, you can't say that, or da 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 da. No, I'm talking about when you're at band rehearsals, that's where people learn you as a leader. They learn what they can get away with and what they can't get away with in saying things, political statements, racial statements. Don't put up with that. Correct it right then and there. Sometimes you may have to do it in public. When I say in public, that means in front of everybody in the band if it's an emergency. Other than that, if it's not an emergency, then you do it in private. Okay? You praise publicly, you hurt them in private. There's two different animals there. Praise people in public, but you hurt them in private, if that makes sense to you. Okay? You don't want to put people on defense in public unless it's an emergency. If it's an emergency, then you do what you got to do. But be proactive about this. Don't take no bull crap on it. You make your corrective statements and or corrective actions. You're the leader. Don't have someone else do it for you. You catch it and you do it. Shake your head. Okay? And at that same token, you want to make sure that you, in a timely, fashion, restate your values, your mission statements periodically and frequently so that the band knows that you're still going this way and you have not deviated to go this way. Your mission statement is very important that they understand you are still on the one. Okay? Because they need somebody to make sure that this band, this business is solid and still moving according to the plan. Make sense? So you just sometimes have to restate your value statements, your mission statements, your goals, your long term, your short term, your medium range goals, because everything changes all the time. Your long term goals, sometimes, well, not sometimes, it periodically changes, but for the greater, not for the lesser. Your short term goals always change because when you meet one goal, you're establishing another one, right? So there's always a short, medium, and long range. Okay. Don't forget to watch out for your thieves. Do you remember what I talked about a long time ago about thieves in your band? Because as you progress in your band and as you have different type of people, you may have new thieves. In other words, what are thieves? Those are the people that come in there to steal your ideas and steal your people, remember? And they go and they launch their own stuff. So you have to always be on the lookout for thieves. Sorry to say, that's just an ongoing thing. Why do you think people get fired from the bands a lot of times? Because they're a thief or because they're thieving the ideas, right? So be on the lookout for thieves in your business, your band. Your band is your business. Your business is your band. Make sense? Okay. Don't forget to, when you're looking for thieves, that's a negative type of person, also. So you want to make sure that you keep all negativity out of your band. Negative. I'm not talking about constructive criticism. There's a difference between a person being negative and a person offering constructive criticism. You take constructive criticism, you weigh it out, see the value in it if there is any for real. And if you can't use it, throw it in the trash can. But don't tell the person you're throwing it in the trash can. Just throw it in the trash can, right? You don't tell everybody everything you throw out in your trash can, do you? No. Okay, so you keep some things. Next thing I want to talk about here has to do with, again, making that, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I hope y'all love me for jumping all over the place because it's okay. Making that cash register of that venue ring. I want to talk just a second more about how do you make the cash register ring. Remember now, your mission is not just to make money. Your mission is to make somebody else money. If you don't make somebody else money, they're not going to like you. They're not going to have you back. So what do you do? How do you do it? You're nice. You're professional. You do all the things that you would want somebody else to do if you were that venue owner, such as you invite people up to the bar from your stage. When you're playing, and you tell them, hey, you know what, they got a special on XYZ tonight, and they're offering the first 10 people that come up there and order this XYZ discount, or a free ticket for whoever. All right, you do things to help boost their sales and help boost their cash register revenue from the stage. They will love you for it. They'll love you so much that when you come back, they'll start, somebody's going to start telling you, hey, look, here's our menu, and we got this on the menu now. Can you mention this? Because a lot of venues don't do that. And people, they're silent. They're just behind their cooking orders, making drinks or whatever, but they're not really, really getting pushed by the band. And a lot of bands say, well, they have to bring the people and they have to, it's their responsibility. No, it's a two-way thing. It works both ways. And if you help them and you show them that you appreciate, then they'll definitely serve you too. Make sense? So you want to make sure that you help their cash register ring. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is when you're mix, you have to learn how to mix your own sound. Okay? You want to sound good? Then you pre-mix your own sound from the stage. Feed it to their main mix board, if possible, if you're able to do that. Don't always constantly, want to blame the sound guy because your sound is coming out sounding like blah. What happened? It's the sound guy, da 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 da. If you have the capabilities and you're friendly and you're professional and you compliment the sound guy, you do what you gotta do in order to be able to do what you have to do. You feed him. Hey, look, guy, we're going to mix it from the stage. And all we need to do get from you is loudness. That's all. We don't need you to do anything else because we're going to mix. We already know what we like and how we like it. And guess what? Unless he's a really ugly individual, he's going to say, okay, cool. Hey, y'all got patch 10 and 7 and 17, 11 and 12, and you just feed me what you got and I'll just make it loud or I'll make it soft, you know? But if they don't have to do a lot of EQing, that helps out a lot. It helps your sound. So you have to professionally be able to pre-mix your sound the way you like it, your signature sound. And in case you don't know, a lot of these major acts, guess what they do? They pre-mix from the stage. That's why you see boards up there on the stage in addition to boards that are out there in front of the house, because they're pre-mixing from the stage, because their traveling sound guy usually works from the stage, and then the venue's sound guy, and maybe one of the majors sound guy goes out there in front of the house, but usually the majors have their sound people up on a stage because those sound people, they rehearse with them, They know everything about when everybody is getting ready to do X, Y, Z and how they want it to sound because that's what they do. They work for the major act. The venues guys, they work for the venue. Make sense? So if you want to do this thing for real, then you need to make sure that you know how to professionally mix your own sound. Don't have to have large for small local bands. You don't have to have large mixing boards. Something depending upon like 4 or 5 piece band. Have yourself a 12 channel, 16 channel, whatever. And you don't have to mix every single drum head there is. You don't need that. If you know what you're doing, then you know how to mic drums. And if you can't afford an actual awesome sound system, then make sure your backline, I'm talking about your bass guitar player, your lead guitar player, your keyboard player, those type of people have their own amps that are powerful enough that they can do their own thing. And you use your PA just for your vocals. Okay. Use the PA just for the vocals and stop trying to put everything through your board and coming out sounding all staticky because everything is competing with each other. Okay. This is all relevant. This is part two, managing and running a band. That's part of what you do. You have to know those little intricacies like that. Next thing, you want to make sure that you're bringing backup gear. I mean, don't be so Rudy Putin and amateurs that you come with if you can afford it. Bring 2 guitars, okay? So that way they don't have to stop the show because you broke your G string. You broke your A string, and daggone well, you can't play a song without an A or G string. You're not heavy as that. So you bring another guitar. Same thing with bass players. A lot of bass players I talk to, oh, I ain't never gonna break a string. Wrong answer. That's the worst thing you want to do, especially if a bass player doesn't know how to play for real with 3 strings versus 4. Or they are a 5 or 6 string bass player and now they're down to 4 and they don't know how to act now. They don't know what to do. They're panicking. And guess who knows about all this? The audience, which I'm getting ready to go into right now, because they look at your face. They look at the band's face. They know something's wrong. They can't put the hand on it. They can't put the finger, but something's wrong because they're looking at the faces of disapproval, which is the next thing I want to talk about. Don't be making faces at your band members because they make a mistake or they have an accident. Okay? You better keep your smile where it needs to be, which is straightforward. Don't look over there and go, oh, what are you doing? That's the wrong answer. And you don't see professionals do it. What you do see professionals do is they laugh. They laugh. And the audience don't get it. But like people like me, I'll say, yeah, okay, I know it. Oh, you're right, right. I know what's up with that. But it's not as bad as somebody making a face. And you'd be surprised how many bands do that. And you probably have even seen it yourself. That you've seen people make mistakes and then you've seen the band members turn over and look at them or give them a disapproval or whatever. It's embarrassing also, right? So you want to make sure that's kept on a low. Um, you determine early in advance if your band is going to use IEMs, in other words, in-ear monitors, or actual physical monitor systems. And you practice with those. You rehearse with those. You rehearse with the items that you're going to use on stage. Don't get on stage and then all of a sudden you're using IEMs for the first time. Okay. And that's embarrassing because you're not going to get it right. You're probably going to spend half the time um, trying to just get used to it during sound check. Get used to it at rehearsals. Get used to being, if you're going to play with a click, Get used to it at rehearsal. Don't wait until you get out there on the stage and start using this, high tech stuff, and you fall and you crash. Okay. That's the same thing with your formation. When I say formation, I mean how you stand and how you're situated when you're on stage. Practice at your rehearsal doing that. If you're used to standing on the left of a drummer or on the right side of the bass player, or the keyboard player is slanted, whereas he sees everyone, do that at rehearsal also. So that way everyone knows where the sound comes from. Because let me tell you something. Some people, their ears are trained to the point whereas they'll tell you, well, I like the bass guitar coming from my right ear. Or, I need that drummer, the hi-hat. I need to hear that over here, you know, or the drummer. Most drummers, when they play, they're usually facing the hi-hat. So that means they're receiving all direction from the left. So the keyboard player, a lot of times, is on the left. If not, then the drummer's got to the right. And that may affect some drummers playing, because a lot of times when a drummer is playing with his snare drum and his hi-hat, he's looking to the left. Okay, he's looking to the left. And when he hits that crash cymbal, it's to the right. That's the only time that he may look to the right. Other than that, he's focused on the left. Now, unless he's a left-handed drummer, then he's going to be to the right because the hi-hat's going to most time be on the right. But the average left-hand drummer, they're looking to the left. So you want to make sure, if possible, your music director or whoever's giving all the orders is where that drummer, that timepiece is, which also brings me to the point, stop hiding your drummers because they deserve to be seen also. You see so many bands that if the drummer's not up on a platform of stage, that there's somebody standing right in front of the daggone drummer. You can't see his face. Or you might every now and then see his hands, somewhere, but you can't see the drummer. So tell your band to move over enough that they can, audience can see your drummer. All right. Now, some drummers say, I don't want to be seen, wrong answer. That's just tough. We want you to be seen because it also helps when you're talking about photography and for taking videos, right? You want people to see, don't rely on your camera guy to have to move all the time to get everybody. You have a formation set so that in your band rehearsal room, people are standing exactly how they should be if the stage is big enough, okay? How they should be in a live performance. You with me? And these are things that a lot of bands don't think about. They just get up there on stage and they play. They set their amps up. Guitar player sits his amplifier right in front of the bass drum, hiding the name of the drum set. Hey, guy, look, I want people to know I play a Yamaha set of drums. I want people to be able to see the name on the drum set. You know, the ABC band. Don't be putting your amp in front of it. Find some other way, but you may have to sometimes, as the leader, say, um, let me ask you a question. Can you hear if your amp is over here? The reason why is because I want everyone to see the drummer, or I want the name of the band to be visible on that bass drum head. But your amp, even though it's tilted back, it's still covering that. Can you kind of like move that over? You be nice about it, and you tell them, and people will agree. Okay, yeah, hey, I got you. Yeah, sure, I can do that. I'll move it over. It's the same thing with keyboard players. A lot of times your keyboard player, they like to be hidden sometimes too, unless they're a vocalist. You want to tell the keyboard player, especially if he is the music director of your band, can you move out a little bit more and slant yourself, whereas the people can see you and the band can see you also and receive direction from you. We don't need the whole entire band looking to the right all the time, waiting for signals, because that they're taking their attention off of the audience, which means it's just as bad as your back being turned to the audience. You don't turn your back to the audience, do you? No. So you don't want everybody's face all the time looking in one direction because they're receiving direction from somebody that's all the way on the other side of the stage. You with me? This is big boy stuff, big girl stuff. Okay. So this is part two, big boy and big girl stuff, stuff that you need to make sure that you keep in mind. Um, when you're up there on stage and you're looking for something to say to the audience, one thing that you don't want to say to the audience, you don't want to air out your dirty laundry. There's many bands that go up there and they air out their dirty laundry about their family or they had this problem they had, or before coming to the stage, well, I had a flat tire and then the police stopped me and that's the reason why I was late and oh, I got stopped at the door with security. They warned me and then I had to go back out to the car because I had something in my pocket and we're glad we're here tonight though, but blah 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 blah. People don't want to hear that. Sure, they want to know that you're human, just like them, right? But they don't want to hear, don't steal people's facade about you. Don't steal people's greatness that they have in their mind about you. Okay? You are a public image. So don't don't belittle yourself to people. You with me? Greg, is there anything you want to talk about on that? Am I making sense with that? Okay. Um, next thing is it's something that's really funny when you're at rehearsal also. It's not really funny. It's kind of being arrogant. Stop noodling. Stop noodling and beating the drums and everything else when someone's trying to learn the part that they should have learned at home. Because remember, practice is at home, rehearsals at band. But if your band is trying to go over something, the worst thing you want is a guitar player or a bass player constantly noodling. When I say noodling, I mean they're playing, and you can't really get it together if somebody else is over there banging, because they're just banging. They're nervous. They're banging. They're trying to get their part right, but you're trying to concentrate on somebody else's part. You with me? So in other words, you stop your band. It's called discipline. Basically, it's discipline. You want to make sure that you're not overplaying when someone else is trying to learn a part, or the music director is trying to say, look, we need dynamics here at this point, or we need accents here at this point. Here, listen to the recording. He puts it on, but nobody can hear it because somebody else is over there noodling and they're playing, they're just playing. You ever experienced that? Yeah, if you've been in a live band, gets on your nerves. So you want to make sure you control that. Now, remember, you are the leader. It is your responsibility to control that. Control the noodling. Control the undisciplined actions of people in your band. This is your band. You may run it. Remember we talked about before, you can either be an authoritarian leader or you can be the democratic type leader in the band. You may have a band that's ran on democratic virtues, but sometimes you got to be that authoritarian and say, hey, look, stop it. Okay, it's not going to work. Uh, How many times have you tried to start band rehearsal or you get ready to start a show and then somebody says, "Hey, wait a minute, I'll be back. I'll be right back. I gotta go to the bathroom." Okay. I mean, this is like a dude or girl, come on. We got 5 minutes, you know? You got to tell people even at rehearsal, look, use the restroom prior to rehearsal. Use the restroom prior to the show. Even if you have to babysit and say, hey, okay, look, we got 15 minutes before the show. Anybody, if you got to use the restroom, go get it now and get back because I need everybody ready for downbeat. You know, people, they be tripping, man. And girl, they be tripping. You know, they wait 3 minutes and then I'll be right back. You know, and they can't get back in 3 minutes because they got to wait to get into the bathroom because somebody else is already in there, right? You know, one of the venue guests or whatever, you know. So, you know, you got to think ahead for all of these things. And these are the things that you have to discuss at rehearsals. And your band has to be the type of band that they say they expect this from you. They expect you to be this type of leader. They expect you to jump on them and jam them up if they're not doing it right. But they also expect you not to do it all the time. They don't want you to be just a butthole, but they need to know that you're not for no crap and you are for real, for real. Okay. If you don't want to be here with this kind of discipline, then you need to go find another type of band. We may not get big and known and have all kind of Grammys, but we got the discipline of a Grammy type of band and organization. You with me? Okay. Um, don't forget again to reestablish the roles and responsibilities, even down to the point of load ins and load outs. What I mean by that is if, say, for instance, you have a group and you have older people in there, okay, you know, I mean, like, hey, we can't lift 200 pounds, you know, a 200-pound speaker, but we may be able to carry the books. We may be able to carry little cables. We may be able to carry something, okay? Expect that from them also and let them know, hey, let me ask you this, without violating your medical status, you know, without getting too personal, what's the heaviest that you can lift and carry, say 50 feet? You know, you do this in private. Don't publicly, you know, shame them because, you know, they got a bad back or you know, they can't, you know, lift or do this or do that. You don't publicly shame person because they cannot physically carry a soundboard travel case from the trailer to the stage. You find out what they can carry and you expect them to carry that. Okay? Unless they have an emergency that they can't. Well, my back is just not happening today, girl. I can't carry that, but I can help do this or that. I can stand by the stage or stand by the trailer and guard it and make sure that nobody takes anything as you bring it out. Okay, I can do this or I can do that. And you know, you let them do that. Now, there may come times that you may have a person that cannot physically do any lifting, any dodging, any jumping, or anything. And that's understandable. That's just the way it is. Okay. But if a person can run, dodge, and jump, you know, then you know you expect them to be able to run, dodge, and jump. Because you got a lot of young people out here that are totally capable of picking up stuff, carrying stuff, and they sorry. I'm sorry to say, they are very sorry. They can't lift nothing. They won't even try. They'll stand over there and they'll smoke their cigarette. They'll, you know, go talk out there in the audience while you are trying to offload stuff or load up stuff. And you know, daggone well, you need help. but you don't, if you have to go over there to them and say, hey, look, Jim, can you give us a hand? We still got this stuff and we're running back on time. We really need help. And he keeps saying, well, yeah, I'll be over there in a minute. I'll be over there in a minute. And he never gets over there. That's the person that we're going to talk about later on about how to terminate them. When we get into the terminating people's phase discussion, then we're going to talk about how to handle people like that. But the long story short is you expect everyone to be able to lift, carry, or hold or guard something. Lift, can you lift? Can you carry? Can you hold? Can you guard? Okay, can you lift? Can you carry? Can you hold? Or can you guard? Which one is it? So somebody gonna be able to do something. You can either lift it, or you can carry it, or you can hold it, or you can stand here and guard. You with me? The same thing about don't be late for rehearsal and shows. If they late and you don't want to dock them their pay, then you get rid of them. That's in part 3 about how to get rid of people. But I'm just telling you now, if they late constantly, you get rid of them. Find somebody else. But don't bring that replacement to your rehearsal spot while they still there. Okay, there's time for auditioning then afterwards. But you don't have two people occupying the same position in the same place because you get ready to replace one of them. Did I lose you or you with me? If you got me? Okay, so next thing is I'm going back to mixing now. When you're mixing your stuff, you have to remember, in addition to what you want to hear from an IEM or from a monitor, remember that player has their idea of what they want to hear also. So you have to solve issues like that in the rehearsal room and then be able to cross-relate it to on a big stage. You have to know in advance what Jill or Jack likes to hear more in their ears or in their monitor. And then you need to be able to handle it. So in other words, when I've talked about being able to pre-mix, we're going deeper here now into pre-mixing to what a person wants personally. Everybody has their personal favorite hurts or what they want to hear more of. And it may not be the same as what you think. So you need to make sure that you give them what they need, not what you need. Okay? Give them what they need, not what you need. Before starting a band, you should be able to also be a pretty good soloist. Okay? If, get some time being a soloist. Don't jump into being in a band or even recruiting a band member if possible, okay? That does not have any time being a soloist. Well, why you say that, Thomas? I say that because the person doesn't even know themselves yet. So if they don't know themselves, I'm talking about the internal. I'm not talking about how good they shred or how good they beat or keep a beat. I'm talking about knowing themselves, where they fit in the musical, the musical spectrum, period. Where are you in this music universe as a person, as a musician? Have you established yourself as a soloist? Are you strong and confident enough in your skills and your style that you can contribute really to a whole band? If they can't, then you don't really need them because you don't want them learning when you're past that stage. You don't need learners. You need contributors. It's different. You don't need learners. We learn together, okay? Sure. but you don't need somebody that don't even know themselves yet. Now, you find that people who go out and do the solo acts, the guitar player with tracks, or the keyboard player, people go out there and just do one man shows. I appreciate that because they're learning themselves. They learning themselves, and they're becoming comfortable with themselves. Then when they become a band member, they have something to contribute. They have experience, they have stage presence already, and all they got to do now is learn how to get along with other people that do the same thing. That's it. And mold themselves with the band that's molding. If this person doesn't know themselves, that's bad. That's a bad move for you to pick them for your band. It's a bad move. Okay. It's elementary. It's amateurish. So make sure that that soloist has pretty good knowledge of themselves. If they don't know themselves, you don't want them yet. I'm saying you don't want them. Now, keep in mind, I know that in certain areas where you live, um, you know, there's not many musicians possibly to pick from. So you got to get who you can, where you can, when you can. I understand all that. But if you have the ability and the networking capabilities of getting people that with more experience, not necessarily playing in bands, but just on stage, that's where you make your money, on stage. So you want people with that kind of experience and knowledge. Okay. Um, there's a danger also as band people that we rehearse songs too much versus rehearsing a show. There's a difference. You learn the songs, but you have to fit it in the show. In other words, you got to develop a show. You develop the show. You learn the songs, how to play the songs, but you have to develop the show. So if you're constantly rehearsing songs, but not rehearsing a show, in other words, how it fits into the spectrum of things, the block songs, the transitions, what we started out with, what we're talking about. You got to make sure that you develop the show in addition to the song. At this point, what I want to do is find out if we have any questions real quick before I go into something else, because I think we're at an hour now, almost now. Are there any questions real quick here about anything that I've covered or anything? You good? Okay. Greg, did you want to add anything real quick before I say?
No, I'm good. Yeah, no, I mean, there's lots of different points, but I'm gonna let you just keep talking.
Okay, okay. Um, Next thing I want to talk about here is knowing when to stop spending money on equipment versus spending money on advertising and marketing. Okay, so you get up on stage and you got $50,000 worth of amplifiers and drum sets and everything, but you have nobody to really buy your stuff. You have no one to really listen to your stuff. You have nobody. Why? Because you spent so much money on equipment and everything, which is important also, okay? But you need to make sure that you're also allotting enough money and financial resources to things like marketing. Greg talks about that a lot of times. Marketing, advertising, marketing, that's important. It's one of those D if I do, D if I don't. You can have all the beautiful equipment and strobe lights and smoke machines and everything, but if your marketing is good, then you don't have, what do you have, really? Just a lot of equipment. You don't have any fans. You don't have any of that stuff, right? Okay. So you want to make sure that you know when to stop spending money on equipment versus, your marketing, advertising, promotions, etc., like that. And you want to also include in there spending money for your business building schooling. In other words, stuff like what MIC offers. You want to make sure you have allotment for those type of things. That's important. It's very important. Just like having a guitar or, the best of equipment. You need to make sure that you got the best of education. Because without the education, you don't have anything, do you? Okay. Fight me on that if you want, but nah, you gotta have that. Um, you want to make sure also that you demand from your band and you show it through your attitudes also that you respect everyone's time. You respect everyone's time. Never let your band and or anyone come into your environment and they feel that you don't have it together, that you don't have a plan. Because then they'll start saying, well, I'll miss rehearsal because ain't nothing happening there. I mean, I know it's nothing happening there. They don't respect our time. They spend half the time bull crapping around, talking about this and talking about that. You know, we're not really doing anything. We went over one song, and the rest of the time we, either argued or we talked about, this or that, da 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 da. That's not what's up. This is a business. Okay. So you make sure everybody knows that you respect their time and you demand that they respect everybody else's time too. Right? Um, develop your own sound. Don't try to sound like everybody else unless the signature of the song requires that you sound like that. Other than that, you want to make sure that you are developing your own sound because eventually, hopefully, you're going to start writing your own material. You're an original artist. Okay. So you want to make sure that your band is developing their own sound. I'm not saying that every song that you play that is a cover song um, sounds like your take on it. It's okay. It's cool. Your take on it. But like develop your own sound, but don't destroy the song and what that song was supposed to be like. Make sense? It's okay to put your handle on it, but also those signature points of the song, that solo or that run, whatever, that people relate to, or if it's gone or if it's missing, then they say, it didn't go like that, or what happened? They didn't do this or did that. You make sure you listen to the song enough that you can play or sing or perform that part. I don't care if it's a drum fill or a one chord, what we call a one chord anti or a power chord that's in there definitely. If it's not in there, then people know they screwed it up. Make sure you keep those type of things, but still put your own spin on it. Develop your own sound. Um, this is funny when you're doing your photos or your videos, along with developing your own sound, try to break away from those crossed arms photo shots or the photo shots by the railroad tracks, that everybody's doing. Find something that's unique that describes you. Okay, because you look on all these album covers, either everybody's sitting or standing with their arms folded, or or by the railroad tracks, or out there in the field with the same farmhouse, or what have you. Try to be unique and try to limit the use of AI if possible. I mean, AI is cool, but your posters and everything they start to look the same almost, when people advertising this or that, even some of the AI posters that some of the people put in my band, I look at them sometimes, I say, okay, well, Is it this my band or is it somebody else's band? Because they sometimes they look the same almost, but it's I guess it's the AI going through its phases of templates or whatever, but try to be unique. It's important to be unique. Spend as much time in trying to find uniqueness of yourself, what stands out versus what what is the same. Make sense? Because when a promoter looks at you or a booking agent looks at you, they say, well, what makes you really that different um, than somebody else that I can get cheaper? What makes you so unique that I definitely need you versus somebody else? What is it? I'm looking at your photos and I don't see anything. I'm listening to your material. I don't hear anything that's so unique. I talk to you. I don't feel anything unique coming from you. I'll call you back. And they never call you back. Why? Because you did not impress them enough with something unique that makes them say, I need them, or I'm gonna give them a shot. Something like that. You have to make sure that your business falls in line with that also. If they take one look at your business structure, or they take one look at your EPK, or they take one look at whatever that has to do with looking at paper, and it doesn't line up with something unique or something attractive to them, then they're going to go to the next person. Make sense? They're going to go to the next person. So you got to make sure that you had that uniqueness about yourself. Greg talks about that a lot of times about, having that special thing that puts that bright light on that says, okay, they're different. They got it together. They spent time in making sure they covered all the bases. So I think I'll give them a shot. I think I'll give them a chance. Okay. Okay, so I think at this point right now, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. But I want to wrap it up with one thing, one statement I want to make. And it has to do with dependent and independent band members. And it's not what you think I'm going to say. This has to do with you hiring or bringing on board band members that are dependent on you because they have no job themselves. They have no source or resource of income themselves. So they are dependent on you to pull them through. You don't want those kind of people. You best to find people that have some kind of job, even if it's working at McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, some kind of income, because you don't need the stress of having to make sure that you find gigs 1 month after you recruit somebody. You need time as the band leader and being able to be relaxed enough that the people that you bring on board are self-supporting. Now, I'm not talking about people that are playing in 5 and 6 bands. Okay. I'm talking about people that are so, dependent on income. They need the income so bad. The first thing that comes out their mouth is, when's the next gig? We talked about that in part 1. You don't have time with those kind of people to even form something awesome because you're worried about them not having income. They put their worries on you. You don't need that. You got enough worries yourself trying to make sure that you can keep food and electricity and utilities on and have a place for them to rehearse or whatever. You don't need to have to worry about having to support somebody else. That's what I wanted to close out on, making sure that you pick the right people that don't cause you any stress, especially in that venue right there of income. Y'all with me? Okay, let's open it up for Q&A, Greg.
That sounds good. Thank you so much, Thomas. that was chock full of a lot of really not just good information, but like practical information, like stuff like because obviously you've been in the trenches for years, you really know in and out all the nuances of dealing with band members, and it really shows when you talk about it because it's like, oh yeah, I never thought about that at all. And so you made a lot of really, I think, not just compelling points, but really just like practical ones, just like that I think the day-to-day musician really will encounter, when they're working and doing this kind of work on an ongoing basis with a variety of personalities. So thank you so much for all that. And yes, let's open up for questions. I am going to stop the recording there though, so that we're good.